One of the greatest British motoring mysteries is the Longbridge tunnels. From their use as a shadow factory in the Second World War to their post-war storage for prototypes and experimental cars. The Longbridge tunnel complex has piqued the interest of many Austin, British Leyland and Rover workers, as well as the public over the decades, with stories of its shadowy subterranean landscape. The once subterranean marvel is sadly being dismantled, with its secrets lost forever. From its wandering lost prototypes to the greatest barn find ever, the Longbridge Tunnel Mini. In 1978, an almost secret disaster would unfold beneath the feet of the workers at the Longbridge plant. A raging inferno which would consume one of the tunnels, damaging and destroying several prototypes, with the area sealed in concrete. And with that, a tomb was created for some of the most mysterious cars the site had ever produced. But the story of these cars isn't over. Thanks to the former workers of Austin, BMC and British Leyland, we can now reveal some of its lost treasures, from the Austin 3-litre Princess prototype to the missing Metros. This is the Longbridge Tunnel Complex Uncovered. Hello everybody and welcome to this video. If you're not subscribed already, please make sure to do so. It really does help me out and you get to see more of this. More mysteries, more history and more prototypes, as well as projects like 2600R, my Rover SD1 and my Ford Cortina project. This video is demystifying one of the most mysterious mysteries of British motoring history, the Longbridge Tunnel Complex and the cars that were lost down there all those years ago. This is the culmination of hours of research and speaking to those that lived it, the workers at Longbridge. Remember to like the video if you liked it and drop a comment below. What are your thoughts on the Longbridge Tunnel mystery and the cars that were lost down there all those years ago? But without further delay, let's get into the video. But first, a bit of history on how these mysterious cars ended up there in the first place. The vast secret complex, the Longbridge Tunnels, were completed in 1939 at the outbreak of World War II as a logistics route, shadow factory and an air raid shelter for the 15,000 workers on site, with one of the largest tunnels able to accommodate a 3-ton lorry. These tunnels became part of a huge wartime logistics network, working in conjunction with the Longbridge Overground, and with the massive factory complex disguised in just under 2 days, the plant became almost hidden. After the defeat of the Axis powers in 1945, the entire complex was turned back over to the Austin Motor Company. This left Austin with a vast tunnel network under its factory. The tunnels weren't of much use for production, so they were used as storage, and thanks to their size, cars could be stored and driven in there. With the merger of Austin and Morris to form BMC, the tunnels remained as storage, but would become host to some incredibly interesting cars during this era, which leads us to our first unknown car, a record-setting Austin ragtop. Unfortunately, the identity of this car is unknown and described as looking similar to an Austin 16. This car was stored down there with a map of the world, with several markings on it, showing where the car had been. Perhaps it could have been a record-setting post-World War Austin. During the 1960s, many other concepts and experimental cars were explored, one of which being a relatively unknown collaboration between two industry giants, Rolls-Royce and BMC, to create the ADO 53-based Bentley Java. This new A110-based Bentley would use the F60 engine and be the entry-level Bentley for the mass market, but sadly it never made it past the design model phase. These scale models were stored at the site. This collaboration wouldn't end with the Java. Rolls-Royce and BMC would look into another possible route for their joint venture, a Bentley version of another prototype stored in the tunnels, the Austin Healey 4000. The 4000 was a car born out of a competition with 3 designers creating a car based on the big Healey, the 3000, a Grand Tourer that impressed BMC so much they purchased the rights and the prototype built by Pininfarina. The 4000, before its shelving and storage in the tunnels, would be developed further, but after running into many issues during its development, the car would be confined to the tunnels. At the time though, this wouldn't be the most infamous tunnel car. After the introduction of the Mini Cooper S in the early 1960s, the sheer demand for parts for these cars outstripped supply, which led to the creation of a lucrative black market. A brand new Mini Cooper S would make its way into the tunnels straight from the production line and be stripped one part at a time, with it being discovered a few years later by some workers exploring the tunnels, with only its shell remaining. It is not known who did this, but at the time it was suspected to be a contractor. BMC in 1967 would launch the Austin 3 litre, its new luxury saloon. At the time, however, they were exploring an even more upmarket version, the Vanden Plas 3 litre, a new version of ADO 61 with the usual VDP treatment. With the Austin 3 litre not performing in the market like BMC had hoped, and the general market turmoil at the time, the project would be abandoned and condemned to the shadowy depths of the Longbridge tunnels. BMC would merge in 1968 with Leyland to form British Leyland Motor Corporation, the behemoth of industry that would dominate the industrial consciousness, sometimes for the right reasons, but would make the news for all the wrong reasons in the 1970s. During these times, in the 70s and before in decades past, a common issue would arise. The tunnels were simply too vast to police. Workers would go into the tunnels for all manner of reasons, some work-related, for example to weigh cars on the scales installed down there for the experimental department, and some extracurricular, to go for a nap, or generally have a mess about. From the Austin apprentices in the 50s to the BL workers of the 70s, this was rife. As time went on and the tunnels became more full with cars and parts, the problem would get worse. The new subterranean subculture of the tunnels would hit new heights in the mid-70s, with the 1275 GT Mini making its way into the tunnels. This Mini would apparently be used as an express way to get around by workers. It would later have a container fall on it, with the car being abandoned and stripped for parts. At the height of the 70s BL turmoil, some workers would go into the tunnels and sleep, leaving their hard-working colleagues to pick up the slack. But again, due to the sheer size of the complex, this was incredibly hard to police. In 1972, British Leyland would be exploring its new car to replace the Mini, its next big seller. Project ADO 74 would begin that year, but would be fraught with financial issues. Some of these cars would later be stored in the tunnel after the project's cancellation in 1974. ADO 88 would then take over from ADO 74 and would then evolve into LC8, which would produce the Metro. These cars would all be stored in the tunnels after its cancellation in 1977, filling up the tunnels even more with experimental cars, concepts and prototypes. Around this time, the tunnel complex's security would become even more lax. This would spell disaster a year later. Friday the 27th of October 1978 would be Longbridge as usual. Production of cars and experimentation with new models. Security on the tunnels was minimal. One part of the complex was filled with cars and experimental prototypes, the Princess 3 litre, the ADO 88 and 74 prototypes, and the Healey 4000. At 4 PM that day, one worker, Austin employee Keith Pierce, was in the design office foyer and could smell acrid smoke, but with no obvious smoke or fires in the building, Keith went outside to the design office car park. He then discovered the vents for the tunnels were spewing smoke. Keith then ran back into the office to raise the alarm and phone the fire brigade. Another worker would be asleep in one of the connecting tunnels, completely oblivious to the disaster unfolding just a few compartments away in the Southworks tunnel. The fire would begin to envelop the complex. The Northfield fire crews off-site would be the first to attend, with the on-site Longbridge fire station attending 40 minutes later, according to one employee. An argument would ensue between the on-site and off-site fire teams, but in the end the job needed to be done. The fire would be extinguished on the 28th of October 1978. This wouldn't be without collateral damage. A part of the complex sprung a leak and managed to close one of the main railway lines out of Birmingham thanks to foam covering the tracks. Keith, the person who reported the fire, would be reprimanded for using another department's phone. The sleeping worker would escape that Friday unharmed, unaware at the time of what had transpired just a few yards away. On the 2nd of November, the tunnels were handed back over to the site, but the damage was done. The Princess 3 litre, ADO 88 and 74 prototypes, the Healey 4000 were all destroyed, along with several unknown experimental engines and parts. The Bentley models were also destroyed in the tunnels that day as well. A recovery effort was made, but sadly there wasn't much left, other than charred remains, twisted metal and pools of formerly molten metal. All of the cars mentioned were lost, with the mystery of the pre-war Austin's fate unknown. The 1275 GT Mini would make it out thanks to Steve, an enthusiast who discovered the car in the underground in 2012. This Mini is currently on display at the British Motor Museum in Gaydon, going from what could have been its shadowy grave to pride of place in the collection centre. The tunnels are now being filled in with their secrets buried with them forever. But with the help of the people that worked at Longbridge, I hope we've successfully demystified one of the greatest mysteries of the site, the secret world of the Longbridge tunnels and the cars that were lost there so many years ago. The tunnels are now fully inaccessible. This has been a great series of videos to make and a great mystery to explore, speaking to some of the most incredible workers and people who lived Longbridge all those years ago. Now, as always, drop a suggestion below. Do you think there was anything else lost in there? What's your opinion on the ADO 88 74 prototypes? But as always, thank you for watching, keep watching, and remember to subscribe for more of this, and I'll see you in the next one.